Okay, Cupcake, say ah. Ah. Ugh. Were they actually feeding each other? Seriously? How was I meant to concentrate on the movie with them doing that? Ugh, gross. Annoyed, I stood up, tipped my bucket of popcorn on their heads, then walked off. Don't panic, I'm not a crazy person. They weren't some random couple. Nope. I know them. The girl Shelly, she's my best friend. For as long as I can remember, it was just me and her. Best friends against the world. But then one day, this guy Leon showed up out of nowhere, and boom, they started dating. Do you know what the worst thing was? This Leon guy was 2 years younger than me. He was so immature, seriously. Every time I made plans with Shelly, he tagged along too. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Shelly. I rolled my eyes as I answered, knowing she'd be furious. Peter, how could you? I keep finding popcorn in my hair. It's gross. You're so childish. Yeah, whatever. She was the one who turned me into a third wheel for our scheduled movie night. I ended the call. I was done talking to her. That's when I saw the news article pop up on my phone. There was a weather warning for a freak magnetic storm. It was advising everyone to stay at home and turn all technological devices off. Well, that was fine by me. It's not like I wanted to stay out anymore anyway. So I went home and went straight to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and, why was my dad sitting at the end of my bed? I rubbed my eyes and asked him what was up. He seemed lost in thought, but then he put his hand on my shoulder and said, Nothing, son. If you feel like you want to talk, I'm here for you. I understand. Then he left my room. Huh? What was that all about? I went downstairs for breakfast. That's when I heard my granny say, I will prove to you guys that he's not. Then I heard Dad say, Mother, it's no big deal. Even if it's true, he's still our Peter. But when I walked into the kitchen, they all fell silent and gawped at me. I said, hey, you guys, what's the topic? Then my mom replied while passing me a plate of pancakes. Nothing, son. Even my younger sister Lena was acting strange. She gave me this weird smile, then shook her head. Okay, this was odd, but I just shrugged it off and ate my breakfast. Afterward, Mom asked me to help her out in the rock garden. Yeah, sure, I mean, it's not like I had anything better to do. Now, let me tell you, those rocks are way heavier than they look. As I struggled to carry one, I puffed out to Mom, Where do you want this? It's so heavy. Can you call out Dad to help? Shaking her head, she said, No, you can do it. You're not a weak boy. Then she continued to direct me to carry the pile of rocks all over the garden. I carried on until I had jelly arms and couldn't manage it anymore. I told Mom I needed to take a break and began to head inside. She shouted after me, No, you can do it by yourself. You're a big, strong boy. I didn't get it. Why couldn't she see that I was exhausted? That's when I spotted Shelly peering at me over the fence. She smiled, then waved me over. Hang on. Wasn't she still in a mood with me? So what had changed? Whatever. I needed to escape Mom, so I went over to her. She apologized for yesterday, then asked me if I wanted to go shopping. I agreed. Anything to get me out of lugging more rocks about. As I walked over to Shelly's car, I spotted my neighbor standing outside of his house. I smiled over at him, but he gave me this odd look, then started giggling. I quickly looked down at my pants. Nope, I hadn't forgotten to do my zip up, so why was he laughing at me? I was thinking about how weird everyone was being as I got into the car. Then I thought out loud, maybe it's the storm? It sent everyone bonkers. Then I told Shelly about all of the crazy things that had been going on. She nodded and said, Yeah, it must be down to the storm. Well, it did make sense, because I'd read about magnetic storms and how they could impact people's moods and stuff. At the mall, we went into a shop and I helped her choose some clothes to try on. I picked up a purple dress and told her it was a lovely color, when suddenly my granny jumped up out of nowhere and said, No, you don't love it. Follow me. I'll get you some new clothes. Then, before I could work out what was going on, she was pulling me out of the shop. I was so confused. Granny, why are you here? Did you follow me? She smiled up at me and replied, Peter, darling, don't blame me for wanting the best for you. Huh? This was strange, but okay. I was about to get new clothes, so I didn't think I needed to question more about it. We ended up in this vintage shop, and I felt like I'd stepped into a time loop. All the items were from the 80s or even older. She started grabbing items off the rails and saying things like, "Ooh, I like this one," and "You'll look very handsome in this." This wasn't my style, but Granny looked so excited, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So yeah, I ended up trying the clothes on. I looked ridiculous. Granny seemed delighted. She gasped, clapped, and exclaimed, "Oh my, you're such a handsome boy," while Shelley was trying her hardest not to laugh. After that, we all went home, and yep, I was wearing the funny outfit. Everyone was pointing and laughing at me, but Granny seemed oblivious to this. She just smiled and said, "All the girls will fall for you now." Yeah, right. I doubt it. Later on, I was in my room minding my own business when my phone beeped. "Hey, I go to the same college as you. I saw you yesterday and I like your style. Do you want to hang out sometime? Lily, X." Huh? Was this someone's idea of a joke? I didn't know this number, nor this Lily girl. What was going on? The magnetic storm had sent everyone loopy, and I seemed the only sane one left. I immediately texted back that I wasn't interested, but geez, this girl was stubborn, and she wouldn't stop messaging me. Over the next few days, Granny's bizarre behavior continued. It was stressing me out. She kept giving odd looks in my direction and muttering stuff to Mom about me. But then one time she actually followed me when I was on my way to the shop and asked me why I wasn't in the outfit she'd bought for me. When I told her it was in the wash, she looked upset, shook her head, and mumbled out something about how I'd never find a nice young lady in my scruffy clothes. I tried messaging Shelley about it, but you guessed it, she was too busy with Leon to talk. So, in my loneliness, I turned to Lily. She was really sweet and said that my granny was probably just having an old people crisis, as the same thing happened with her gran, and that we should meet in the park and discuss it. I agreed to meet her, and while I was waiting for her to show up, this guy with movie star looks walked over. At first, I thought he was going to ask me for directions or something, but then he said in a flirty voice, "Hey, you're on time." Then before I could say anything, he continued, "It's me, Lily." What was going on? This was insane. I asked him, "Okay, so what game are you playing at?" He looked confused, then shook his head and said, "Well, I just want to hang out with you." Then he came closer to me and leaned on my shoulder. I pushed him away and stepped back. "Oh no, I'm not gay." He frowned at me, then shouted out, "What? You are. Everyone knows that you are." I stood there feeling puzzled, when who should show up but my sister Lena. I asked her, "What the hell are you doing here?" With a Cheshire cat grin on her face, she said, "Just testing out if you're gay or not. And I have the answer. You're not. Now I'll have to tell Mom and Granny." Then she pulled out her phone. I grabbed her hand and said, "Hold on. What? Gay? Who said that? What's going on?" "I'm talking about the rumor. A couple of days ago, the neighbor told Mom that you're gay. Dad was cool about it, but Mom and Granny didn't take it well. Anyway, I told them I'd find out for sure. At first, I thought you were because you weren't interested in Lily, but now," she looked at the guy, "my friend Robbie confirmed you're not." Okay, this was crazy, but where did this rumor come from? I asked my sister and she replied, "Oh, they heard it from Leon." Leon? This was suspicious. So I went over to Shelley's for answers. As soon as she opened the door, I rose my eyebrow and asked her, "So, Shelley, everyone thinks I'm gay, and apparently it's down to something Leon said. Would you happen to know anything about this?" She blushed. "Peter, I'm sorry. Leon was so jealous of you that I ended up telling him you were gay, just so he'd be cool with us hanging out." I gritted my teeth in anger, then yelled, "I can't believe you ruined our friendship over that guy. So you'd rather spread wrong rumors about me than put some actual sense into your ridiculous boyfriend's head? You're so selfish. Well then, go live happily ever after with him as you wish. I'll stay out of your way." Then I hurried off. Later, she tried to call me, but I just turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up and checked my social media to see a notification from Shelly pop right up. She had written a long post to tell everyone the truth and to apologize to me. Perplexed, I came downstairs to grab breakfast while considering if I should forgive her. Then I saw sitting in the living room was Shelly. Mom said she'd come over since early morning to apologize to me and my family. "Come, dear, she knows what she did wrong," Mom whispered to me before leaving us two alone. Shelly came right up to me. "Peter, I'm really sorry for being a jerk. You're my best friend, and Leon will just have to like it or lump it. I can get another boyfriend, but I never want to lose a friend like you." She spread out her arms. I hesitated, then we eventually hugged it out. So, Shelly and I are best friends again. My family, well, they're back to normal levels of craziness. Yeah, it wasn't cool of Shelly to start a rumor about me, but so what if it turned out I was gay? I've told Granny and Mom this. I guess they're both just old-fashioned and need to get with the times a bit more, and realize that it doesn't matter if I like girls or boys, as either way, I'm still me. They're same old Peter. At the end of the day, yup, I'm that guy who thought that the magnetic storm turned everyone crazy. One thing's for sure, Shelly will never let me forget this.
Hi, that's me, Maxine, hiding behind some bushes and spying on a girl. Don't get me wrong, I don't have a crush on her, nor am I a total psychopath. I'm just doing a favor for my mate Damon. But if I'd known how crazy this was all going to get, I'd never have agreed to help him. It all started when Damon fell in love with this girl, Sophie. She had this mysterious charm that made him want to talk to her right away. And he did. She didn't even glance at him. She just walked away. Ouch. I didn't like her one bit. She was so stuck up. But Damon didn't give up that easily. He tried all kinds of tricks to get her attention, even waiting for the bus with her, even though he had a car. Nothing worked, though, and this made him miserable. He begged for my help, but I said, "No way." Then he said, "Oh, come on, Maxine, you're a girl, so just befriend her or something. Maybe you can find out what she likes, her fave foods, music, etc. Then I can try to impress her. Please, I'm begging you. I'll even lend you my Nintendo Switch for a month if you agree. You can't say no to that." He had me at that. I'd do anything to get a Nintendo Switch. Fine, it's a deal, but don't blame me if it doesn't work. So after class that day, I searched for Sophie. She was at the bus stop, and I was about to approach her when suddenly she walked away. I decided to follow her, and on the way, she stopped to help an old lady cross the road. Wow, I was surprised. For someone with such a cold face, she had a pretty warm heart. Maybe she wasn't so bad after all. After that, she started walking towards the park, and by then it was starting to get dark. What was she doing? She sat down on a bench in a creepy part of the park, almost like she was waiting for someone. I hid behind a bush so she wouldn't see me, but I was totally freaked out. Suddenly, two guys appeared and started talking to her, but they didn't seem like her acquaintances. Oh my gosh, she looked panicked. I had to help. I quickly shouted, "Help! Officer, please help! There are two guys bothering us!" Obviously, there was no officer, but it worked. The two guys ran off, and I rushed over to make sure Sophie was okay. She was surprised to see me, but then she hugged me and thanked me for saving her. Her whole body was shaking. She must have been terrified. I walked with her back to our dorm, and she told me how she liked to come to the park at night because it was so peaceful. I told her it was clearly dangerous and that she probably shouldn't go alone anymore. Then we exchanged numbers, and after that we became quite close. Close enough. That was a few days later. I told her Damon had a big crush on her and asked if she'd maybe go on a date with him, but she just shook her head and said she wasn't ready. Her eyes looked sad, so I didn't push it any further. Maybe she'd just gone through a bad breakup? I didn't ask her again, but one night I was heading to her dorm for a movie night when I heard two people fighting. It was Sophie and some guy, and she was crying. It looked like the guy was about to hit her, so I ran over and said, "Hey, what the heck do you think you're doing? Leave her alone or I'll call the cops." He just laughed at me and said to Sophie, "We're not done yet." Then he stormed off. I asked Sophie if she was okay, and who that guy was. Then she told me how he was her ex and that he kept trying to get back together with her, but she wasn't interested. As she told me this, she started to cry and said, "Because of him, I've become so scared and anxious. I'm even too scared to sleep at night." I felt so sorry for her and told her I was here for her and that she could call me anytime. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said that because that's exactly what she started doing. Every night she'd call me and we'd end up chatting until 3 a.m. I was so exhausted, but I wanted to help her. She seemed so anxious all the time. Damon knew we chatted a lot, but he'd stopped asking about Sophie. It seems he'd lost interest and was more worried about me looking like a zombie from The Walking Dead. "You seriously need some sleep, Maxine. Leave Sophie be. She's clearly got issues. It's probably best to not get too involved." Easier said than done, though. But that night I decided not to answer her call. I went to bed early, and when I woke up the next morning, I had about 20 missed calls and 50 texts from her. Oh my gosh! Some of them said she was so lonely and that I'd abandoned her. Then one said, "If you don't pick up, then I will end it all." Okay, this was crazy. I immediately called her, but she wouldn't pick up. I rushed to her dorm, but nobody answered. I was panicking by then and bashing on the door, screaming, "Sophie, open this darn door!" But there was still no answer. I was terrified she'd done something bad, so I asked some students to help me bash down the door, and that's when she opened the door. I've never been so happy to see someone alive. I ran over to hug her, but she looked so annoyed. "What are you doing here? You're making a scene," she said. "What? I was so worried about you. You said you were going to..." But she interrupted me and said, "You need to get some sleep, Maxine. You seem insane." I couldn't believe it. After all those calls and texts, she was the insane one, not me. I didn't feel like yelling back, so I just left her. I needed some space. She tried to apologize to me over the next few days, but I didn't want to be around her. She even texted me saying if I wouldn't be her friend anymore, then life wasn't worth living. I was so tired of her threats, so I just ignored them. And then things got worse. A few days later, Damon and I were studying together when Sophie called me and said she was in the hospital. She told me that she had a brain tumor and they'd just done a biopsy to see if it was malignant or benign. I couldn't believe it. She asked me if I could pick her up, and I said, of course. This was so scary. I told Damon, and he just said, "I think she's making it up, Maxine. How could she suddenly have a tumor? You guys just had a fight, and suddenly she's in the hospital? Come on, think about it." I was shocked. "Damon, how could you? You're such a jerk." Then I ran off and arrived at the hospital to find Sophie sitting outside wearing a hospital cap. She said her hair had been shaved off for the biopsy, and I asked to see the scar, but she wouldn't show me. She said she'd get a headache if she took it off. I was just glad that she was okay and gave her a ride home. We made up, and I decided to look after her for the day. She seemed so weak. I couldn't bear to see her suffering. I called Damon to tell him that he owed me an apology and told him about Sophie. And he just said, "Oh, wow, okay, sorry, hope she's okay then." But then a few days later, he called me and said, "Listen, Maxine, Sophie's a liar. She didn't have a biopsy. I bumped into her earlier and her cap fell off, and she has a full head of hair under there. No way it would grow back that fast." Why would she lie to me? I didn't get it. I needed to know the truth, so after class I went to her dorm. She opened the door right away, and sure enough, she had all her hair intact. She probably knew Damon had told me, and so hadn't even bothered to keep up the lie. This made me furious. Straight away, I started shouting at her. "Honestly, Sophie, what is wrong with you? Why would you pretend to be sick like that? Friends don't do that." Sophie grabbed my hand and said, "Maxine, I'm sorry. I was desperate. I only did it because I missed you and wanted you to care about me again. I took it too far, though. Please forgive me." "Are you crazy?" I screamed. "I was worried sick about you. Are you sure there's not something wrong with you?" Sophie started grinning in a weird way and said, "The only thing wrong with me is that I'm in love with you, Maxine." She wouldn't let go of my hand, and I just stared in shock. What did you say? You heard me. I love you. Then she started to manically laugh and said, I've loved you since the day we first met. I knew you were following me, so I pretended to be in danger so you'd come rescue me. Even my ex-boyfriend was fake. He was just one of my friends pretending. Can't you see? I'm willing to do just about anything to get your attention. If that's not love, then what is? This couldn't be happening. I tried to stay as calm as possible and said, Listen, Sophie, I'm flattered. Really, I am. But I'm straight. I see you as just a friend, okay? But Sophie wouldn't give up. She grabbed my hands again and said, How do you know that? You didn't even try to love me yet. Just give me a chance, and I'll show you what true love looks like. I tried to let go of her hands, but it was impossible. Sophie grabbed my hands tighter and tighter that it even began to hurt. She looked me in the eyes, and oh my God, it's like I couldn't recognize her anymore. She looked like a crazy person, like a psychopath. Then she began to speak in a really creepy tone. You can't get away from me. You're mine now. I was so scared. I needed to get out of here, so I pushed her really hard that she fell on the ground, and I ran like a mad woman out of there until I was back in my dorm. Then I called the police, but by the time they reached her dorm, she was gone. I told them what happened and showed them a photo of her, and you won't believe it. Apparently, I wasn't the only girl Sophie had attacked. There were other girls, too. After that night, I was terrified. Everywhere I went, it felt like someone was watching me. Then one evening, after my shift at work, I was walking through the park back to my dorm when I heard someone up ahead. I knew right away it was Sophie, but she wasn't alone. She was with some guys. They spotted me and started heading towards me. But I ran as fast as I could, and luckily the police were just outside the park and went in and arrested them. Sounds like a coincidence, right? Well, it wasn't. Sophie's not the only one who can fool people. I knew Sophie was stalking me, so I told the police, and together we created this plan to catch her, and voila, it worked. Sophie, if you're watching this, I wish you all the best, but let's not meet ever again. That's enough stalking for one lifetime.
All we can do now is pray, the doctor said as he left the room. I looked at Ethan lying on the hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment, and felt my heart sink. Then Elliot came over to me and said, Charles, I think you should maybe go home and rest. There's nothing you can do right now. Yeah, Elliot was right. Now I had to be stronger than ever, and in fact, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have made it through this crazy time. Although Elliot was a newbie in our department, we'd become close very quickly, and I was so grateful for her. I smiled at Elliot and offered to drive her home. And then I went to see my mate Cooper. He'd just got back from living abroad. We'd been friends for years. We first met at a gay pride party. He was bisexual and I was gay. At least, I had been. But now, I wasn't so sure. You see, I realized that every time I was with Elliot, my heart was beating faster than usual. Could it be that? I got so lost in my thoughts, I didn't even see Cooper opening the door. He looked at me and said, Dude, what's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. I told him I was in deep trouble and really needed his advice. Lying on his couch, I explained how my boyfriend Ethan was in hospital, but that I'd started having feelings for a girl. Cooper looked at me with sympathy in his eyes, but then he just nudged me and said, Charles, welcome to my life. It's okay to have feelings for both men and women. It's normal. I asked him what I should do, and he said I should just listen to my heart and let it decide. And then he winked at me and asked to see a photo of this girl who was turning me bi. I opened my phone and showed him, and he looked shocked. His eyes went wide, and I asked him if he thought she was hot too. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. She's my ex-girlfriend, bro. Whoa, what? This couldn't be happening. Then Cooper told me how they used to date and had even set a wedding date. But then something had happened, and they'd broken up. This was too weird. What were the chances? I wanted to ask him more about what she was like and why they broke up. But from the look on his face, it was too painful to speak about. Plus, it also made me feel a bit uncomfortable. I could barely sleep that night, worrying about Ethan and thinking about Elliot and Cooper. It was all so strange. The next day, when I was concentrating on my work, my manager suddenly came over and said, Charles, congrats. You're doing so well. I didn't expect one of your team members that you managed to get promoted so quickly. Huh? What was he talking about? No one had been promoted. I was so confused. He noticed how puzzled I looked and said, "Didn't you know? Elliot took over Ethan's role as director." What? How did this happen? I looked at him in surprise, and he continued. Word on the street is that Elliot is the president's daughter, so it's normal for her to take over. She clearly hid her identity well, didn't she? Then he just laughed and walked off. Wait, if Elliot was the president's daughter, that meant that she was related to Ethan. She was Ethan's sister, right? Oh, this couldn't be. She'd acted like she didn't even know him at the hospital that day. I quickly ran to find her and said, "Hey, Elliot, why didn't you tell me you were Ethan's sister? You know that me and your brother are in love. Why would you hide this from me?" Elliot just sighed and said, "Well, actually, I didn't want to hide this from you. But my parents sent me to help Ethan to run the company. I don't have any experience, so I wanted everyone to treat me like a normal newbie so I could actually learn. That's why I hid my identity. I'm so sorry." I guess she'd done the right thing, as I'd heard lots of gossip behind my back when I'd started dating Ethan. So I sympathized with her. But now it all made sense. The reason I had a crush on Elliot. She looked so similar to Ethan. The same deep blue eyes, the same cheekbones, even the same gestures. She also had the same shrimp allergy, and they both had this pen spinning habit when they're deep in thoughts. How had I not noticed this before? What if I wasn't in love with Elliot? I was just in love with how she was so similar to Ethan. Okay, that made me feel a lot better. So it was Ethan I loved after all. The next day I went to visit Ethan with a huge bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite. When I was walking through the entrance, I spotted Cooper. "Hey, we meet again," I called out. "What are you doing here?" He told me how he was visiting his ex who'd been in an accident, and I said I was visiting my boyfriend who'd been in an accident. "Let's walk together," I said. "What room's your ex in?" 1502, Cooper said. "Are you sure?" I mean, that was Ethan's room, I thought. Then it hit me. "Hang on, is your ex called Ethan?" I asked, really hoping it wasn't. "How did you know that?" Cooper said. "Because Ethan is my boyfriend," I said. This was way too awkward. How was it possible to have this many coincidences? I couldn't believe it. Cooper was shocked too, and said that Ethan was the reason he and Elliot had broken up. He'd fallen in love with Ethan. And Ethan's family had been so upset by this, they kicked Ethan out of the house. Oh, so that's why Ethan never talked to his family and told me to never ask about them. After that mess, unfortunately, their relationship didn't work out. So Cooper packed up his stuff and decided to go study abroad to start things fresh. Oh man, this was a lot to digest. I couldn't help but wonder how Elliot had felt when she'd found out her husband-to-be was in love with her brother. Cooper and I were so shocked, but not as shocked as we were going to be a moment later. We were about to walk into Ethan's room when we heard Elliot's voice. She was speaking in a mean tone, saying, "Ethan, you just wait. How will you feel when your boyfriend falls in love with me? It'll be painful, right? I'll make him leave you and it'll serve you right, after everything you've done to me. It's time for a taste of your own medicine." I froze when I heard her saying that. I turned to Cooper and he was just as shocked as I was. Suddenly he burst through the door and I stormed in after him. Elliot almost fell off her chair in surprise at seeing us. Why are you two here together?" she said. "Hey, stranger," Cooper said. "Come on, Elliot, give it up already. It's been a long time. Things were over between us. Just let go and move on." Cooper was so angry, but Elliot just laughed and said, "Get over yourself, Cooper. It's not about you. I don't have feelings for you anymore. I just want revenge on my brother. It was so cruel of him to steal you away and ruin my life like that." Then with eyes full of hatred, she turned and looked at poor Ethan lying there. I was furious. I realized exactly what Elliot had been doing. Deliberately flirting with me to steal me away from Ethan. How could she? I confronted her on the spot. "What's wrong with you? Why would you treat me like this? And your poor brother?" I didn't expect... Before I could continue, though, she interrupted me and said, "Charles, wait, listen to me, please. It's true that was my intention at first, but then I fell in love with you. And I thought you were starting to fall for me too. I'm so sorry." Elliot then tried to reach for my hand, but I was disgusted. I pushed her away and said, "Get away from me. I don't want to see you anymore." Elliot started crying, but I was too upset to be bothered. I was just so horrified that she'd do this. I was so disappointed in myself, too, for falling into her trap. Poor Ethan. He didn't deserve any of this. I stared at him lying there on the hospital bed. What if he knew? I kept staring at him and swear I saw his fingers twitch. Oh my gosh, was he waking up? Cooper quickly went to the doctor, while I stayed with Ethan and tried to talk to him. Ethan, are you awake?" The doctors ran a few tests and said that Ethan had finally regained consciousness and would wake up properly soon. Cooper and I were over the moon. I was so relieved he was going to be okay. And it seemed like Elliot also felt the same as she stood quietly in a corner of the room, tears streaming down her eyes to the corner of her mouth that turned up in the most subtle smile. And as expected, about a week later, Ethan opened his eyes. I'd never been so happy in my life. He started physical therapy, and I spent a lot of time helping him. Of course, Cooper popped in to visit too, and we all had a good laugh about how connected we all were. This must have been real fate, because calling this coincidence would be an understatement. As for Elliot, she just disappeared. But then a few days later, when Ethan, Cooper, and I were chatting together in the hospital, an email popped up on my phone. It was Elliot, and she said she was so sorry for what she'd done, and she just hoped that Ethan and I could forgive her. Then she said she wished us only happiness. I told Ethan and Cooper the good news, and we were all so relieved. Maybe we could all be friends after all. I mean, Elliot might become my sister-in-law one day, right? Life can be so funny. I'm just so glad Cooper appeared when he did, and everything came out into the open. I'd never forgive myself if I'd left Ethan for his sister. Ethan was always the one for me.
I was sitting on the couch watching a movie with my mom and dad, when suddenly the door slammed shut and we all turned our heads to see what happened. Yep, that's my big sister Taylor making an entrance. She slumped down on the couch and banged her feet on the coffee table. Then, as she scrolled through her phone, she looked up at us and huffed out, why are you all gawping at me like I'm an animal in a zoo? Am I not welcome here? Flustered, my mom immediately replied, No, sweetie, we're all delighted to have you home. Then she turned to me. Anne, darling, go and get your sister a drink. I jumped up to my feet and did as Mom asked. I know what you're thinking. Why is everyone letting Taylor get away with her Little Miss Rude routine? You see, after a huge argument with Mom, she left home at 18 and didn't come back for 7 whole years. Mom seemed so pleased to have her back, so I decided to ignore Taylor's attitude and just go along with it. That afternoon, Mom asked me to go to the grocery store with her so we could buy Taylor her favorite foods, as well as a welcome back gesture. Then we spent ages preparing this delicious meal. I excitedly rushed up to Taylor's room and knocked on the door. Taylor, dinner's ready! She shouted back. Go away! But it's hamburgers, and we got a special dessert, I replied. Poof! I hate hamburgers, and there's no way I'm eating some sugar-laden dessert. I went downstairs and told Mom that she wasn't coming. Mom shrugged and tried to act like it was no big deal, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. Dad tried reassuring her by saying, She probably just needs time to settle in. Yeah, she's probably just tired, I added. Mom forced out a smile and thanked us both. Then she prepared a plate of food and asked me to bring it to Taylor. I knocked on her door and told her the food was outside. She shouted back at me, Take it away! I don't want it! I left it outside of her room, but later on when Mom went up to bed, she saw the untouched plate of food still there. She picked it up and she took it downstairs and made out like it was no big deal. She wasn't fooling me. I could tell that she was biting on her gum to stop the tears. When I was little, I idolized my feisty, beautiful older sister. I loved how she wore clashing colors, the cool ways in which she styled her hair, and her carefree nature. The problem was that she didn't seem to like me. All she ever did was call me a brat, slam her bedroom door in my face, and tell me to stay away from her. 7 years on, and I thought things would be different. She wasn't a teenager anymore. She was an adult. But nope, it seemed clear that Taylor hated me even more than ever. I don't know why. Didn't she view me as a proper sister because we had different dads? You see, my dad isn't her dad, as her dad left when she was a little girl. Then Mom met my dad and had me. I don't know. I just couldn't figure out why she still disliked me so much. As the weeks went on, Taylor didn't seem to settle in at all. Instead, her behavior worsened. She played loud music until the early hours of the morning. She covered the house in her clothes, plates, cups, etc. She was the messiest person ever and never cleaned up after herself. One time, I came downstairs to see her sitting at the dinner table, munching on the sandwiches I'd made for school. Then, when I politely told her this, she snorted and said, "They're gross anyway, so I'm doing you a favor." Then she took Mom's car without asking her, and that meant she had to get the bus to work and ended up late. When Mom talked to her about it, Taylor just smirked, threw the keys at her, said, "You're out of gas," then walked off. Mom tried to keep calm and distracted herself by tidying up. So I tried hugging her, but she shrugged me off and told me to go away. It felt like Taylor could get away with everything, while I was the one getting snapped at for nothing. Still, Taylor must have been through a lot, right? Maybe she just needed some time to reconnect with Mom again. Then peace would be restored to our household. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I was reading in the living room when I heard voices coming from outside. I went to check it out and saw Mom and Dad talking to our new neighbor. They sure looked friendly. Then Taylor appeared and grinning said, "Making friends with the neighbor, are you, Mom?" Mom flustered out, "Taylor, this is Bill, my old classmate and our new neighbor. Isn't it a small world?" "So, you're Mom's age?" "Whoa, you don't look like it." "Hang on, didn't you say you had a crush on some Bill?" "I see why. It's just a shame you rushed into remarrying, isn't it?" Mom and Bill gave awkward looks, while Dad was gritting his teeth. Uh-oh, he didn't look happy. "Lovely to see you, Bill," Mom muttered out before she pulled Dad and Taylor inside. Behind closed doors, she frowned at Taylor, but she just shrugged and left. This must have been playing on Dad's mind, as that evening I overheard him question Mom. "Why did you never mention this Bill before?" "Honey, it was just a slight crush when I was a teenager. You know how it is." "Yeah, sure." Dad scratched his head. Now I was stuck in the middle of all this tension, and it was all down to Taylor stirring the pot again. Then a couple of days later, Dad came home from work and immediately started freaking out. "The bank called. Apparently I spent an obscene amount of money in a watch store. Was it you?" Mom shook her head. I didn't know anything either. Then Taylor piped in. "Speaking of buying stuff, we do need to get something for Bill's birthday. I mean, he did invite all of us, so it'd be rude not to." Uh-oh. I know Mom hadn't got round to telling Dad that Bill had invited the whole family to his party yet. Dad gave Mom a skeptical look and snarled, "Oh, I see. You used my money to buy your high school sweetheart an expensive watch? Listen to yourself! You're being ridiculous! I'm not going to stand around and listen to you accuse me like this." Then Mom stormed off. I really wanted to tell them how this morning I'd seen Taylor lingering in their room, looking suspicious. But how could I bring this up when the atmosphere was so intense? I decided I needed to confront the source of the problem, Taylor. When it was just the two of us, I said to her, "I know it was you. I saw you snooping around Mom's stuff." She just shrugged and replied, "Little Anne, seems you're smarter than you look." "Yeah, I did it. So what?" "Why are you being so cruel? Mom and Dad might split up because of you." To my shock, she grinned and she said, "Well, that is my plan. Why should you get to play happy families when I'm stuck here without my dad?" What? How could she be so selfish? I couldn't hold back my frustration anymore. How can you do this to Mom? I won't let you get away with this. Is that so? And what exactly is a quiet mouse like you gonna do about it? Then she shoved past me and walked off. I know I needed to tell Mom, but this meant breaking her heart. I was going to do it. I just needed to find a gentle way of telling her that her beloved daughter got a buzz out of ruining her life. But then, before I had a chance to figure this out, something terrible happened. The next day, I arrived home from school to find Mom and Dad in the kitchen. Dad had his arms folded and a stern look on his face, and Mom was in tears, as she sadly peered down at some papers on the table in front of her. Divorce forms. What happened? Anne, you have to believe me. I didn't cheat on your father. Then Dad interrupted her. Stop lying. I can see it with my own eyes. Then he slammed a stack of photos onto the table. In the photos, Mom was kissing Bill in a cafe. Huh? This didn't make any sense. I don't understand. I didn't meet Bill yesterday. I met my friend Sandra. But Dad just got even more furious. Then he pulled his suitcase towards the door. Stop lying. I can see what happened clear as day. I can't trust you anymore. Then he left. Mom cried harder after that. I didn't know what to say or react. I wanted to believe Mom, but those photos told me differently. Suddenly, the door opened and Taylor strolled in, looked at Mom crying her heart out, and gave a delighted smirk, then went upstairs. That's right, Taylor! She must have something to do with this. So I kept an eye on her. As I passed her room, I heard her on the phone. And without a second thought, I went to find Mom and dragged her upstairs. Anyway, I owe you this time, dude. Yeah, those photos did the job. Yeah, thanks. Your Photoshop skills are brilliant. They look so real. My mom froze. A second later, she pushed the door open. Then Mom looked at Taylor and mouthed the word, "Why?" Taylor burst out laughing, shrugged, then replied, "It's payback for loving her." She pointed at me. "More than you love me. I want you all to suffer for living happily together. Why does she have you both, while I have nothing?" Furious, Mom slapped Taylor across the face and shouted out, "I'm ashamed of you, and I want you to leave right now." Taylor clutched her face and snarled back, "With pleasure. I hate it here anyway." Then she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I hugged Mom, and we both started crying. My happy family had been destroyed, and all because my sister was jealous and thought Mom loved me more. It was all so crazy. Then, later that evening, Mom received a call from the hospital. Mom's face dropped when she told me that Taylor had been in a car crash. We rushed to the hospital, and the doctor told us Taylor needed emergency surgery. But as she'd lost lots of blood, she needed a blood donation. The problem is that she had a rare blood type, but luckily, Mom had the same. So without any hesitation, Mom told the doctor to take as much blood as Taylor needed just to save her. After the blood donation, Mom didn't recover as fast as expected. Instead, she turned weak and needed medical care. So now, Taylor was in the surgery room, and Mom was in the intensive care unit. This was terrifying. What if I lost them both? I called Dad and spilled out everything that had happened to him, and he immediately rushed to the hospital. The wait was agonizing, but when the doctor came and told me they were both going to be okay, and I could go and see Taylor, I cried with happiness. Seeing her lying there bruised and afraid, I saw a vulnerable side to her that I hadn't seen before. So I took her hand and told her what Mom did for her. She looked embarrassed and turned away from me and muttered out how sorry she was for everything. After that, I visited them both every day. Dad came to the hospital too to check they were okay, but he waited outside of Mom's room as he knew she was still mad at him. Finally, Mom came home. Then a week later, Taylor was also discharged. We went to pick her up, and even though Mom and her didn't talk, I could feel the warmth between them. That night, we were having a cozy dinner. Taylor coughed to clear her voice, then said, "Guys, I want to say something. I know I've been a total brat, and I'm sorry. Mom, I thought you didn't love me because I was a reminder of your previous life, and I was ruining your new, happy family vibes. But now I realize how sacred the mother-daughter bond is. You never left me out. I left myself out. And Anne, I'm sorry I haven't been the big sis I should have been for you. I was jealous of you. but I was wrong to be that way. I hope you can both forgive me. Dad also apologized to Mom for misunderstanding her. We were all blubbering, and then we all hugged each other. We didn't need to say anything. Our actions were enough. We were family, and we loved each other. Families aren't always straightforward, but family is family, through the good times and the bad. And they're always worth fighting for, regardless of how out of this world annoying they can be at times. Trust me, I know all about it.
I've never liked hospitals. Yeah, I get it. No one really does. Yet here I was sitting in the hospital waiting area, silently praying that she would be all right. Geez, I was shaking like an old dog left out in the cold. I just couldn't think straight. Why was no one telling me if she would be okay? Suddenly, a stern-faced doctor appeared and told me, "Sir, the operation was a success. Your sister will be just fine. You can go through and see her now." I didn't know whether to burst into tears because of relief or to run away because of fear. Finally, I still went to see her. She blinked open her eyes, then fixed them on me, and in a groggy voice said, "Who are you?" I get it. My appearance unnerves people. I've never been a looker, and this scar sure doesn't help. But people will always judge. Maybe if they stop to talk to me, then I can tell them that I'm a military veteran who got it due to an accident during training. Training I was doing so I could fight to save their butts. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Now, talking about the girl in the hospital, let me continue my story. Well, it began with my evening shift as a delivery driver. I was humming along to the radio when this girl came out of nowhere and ran straight into the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes, but it was too late. I heard a thud. She was lying there all limp. It was horrible. For a moment I thought she was dead and I was too scared to check on her. Suddenly a thought of abandoning her popped up in my mind. But no, I couldn't be that heartless, so I ran to check her pulse. Phew, she was still alive. I called for an ambulance and told her help was on the way. In the hospital, the doctor said she needed emergency surgery, but they had to have a relative's consent first. The girl had no ID on her or anything. What was I meant to do? I couldn't just sit there and let her die. So I blurted out, "I give my permission. I'm her brother." When the girl asked me who I was, well, I had no idea how to reply. The doctor concluded that she must have memory loss. "So, who are you?" the girl asked me again. I couldn't go changing my story now, so I replied, "I'm Chelvin, your brother." "Oh, hi, Chelvin. I'm sorry. I don't remember you." This girl seemed so sweet. I instantly warmed to her. It's been just me and my dog Buster for I don't know how many years. Girls usually take one look at me and run away as fast as their heeled shoes can take them. But this girl wasn't looking at me like they did. The doctors asked me what her name was, so I said Alice. That was my mother's name. Before I even knew what I was doing, I'd used my savings to pay for her hospital fees. Then I visited her every day. I thought she'd ask me about her family, friends, I don't know, everything. But nope. She just liked listening to me ramble on, mainly about Buster. When she was ready to leave the hospital, I took her back to my house. I made up the spare room and bought some new bed covers, laid some clothes out on the bed, and put some flowers in there to make it look nice. Alice seemed to like it. She smiled, told me I was sweet, then hugged me. I bet I was blushing like a beetroot. I left her there to get ready. Then I made a start on dinner. She came downstairs in this dress I'd bought at the mall for her, and oh my days, she looked like a picture. I made an excuse to go and get her a drink, so she wouldn't see how flustered I was. I thought she'd ask me stuff about her life, but she didn't. Not one question. So I decided to tell her anyway. I mean, I'd spent days making the backstory up, so I may as well share it with her. It's just you and me now, and it has been that way for a long time. Our parents passed away some years ago now. Our mom, she was called Alice too. "Oh, it's a nice name," she muttered back. "Do I look like her?" Yes, you have her hair." I told her a few other things, such as how she'd just broken up with her boyfriend I was in between homes at the moment. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like she was soaking my words in and taking some comfort from them. The next day, things changed, and Alice started doing erratic things. I went downstairs bright and early to find that she'd emptied all of my kitchen cupboards and was scrubbing them clean. When I asked her what she was doing, she ignored me and carried on. It's like she was in her own bubble and couldn't hear me at all. I told myself this was probably just her way of adjusting to everything. But then her odd behavior continued. When a delivery guy knocked on the door, she leaped behind the couch. Afterward, I asked her what was up, but she said she was just looking for her lost earring. Another time, I was waiting for my favorite TV show to start, and we were both chatting on the couch, but she suddenly grabbed the TV remote, turned it off, then walked out of the room with the remote. This was normal, right? She'd been through a lot. Maybe this was a stage of her recovery? Most of the time, she was such a sweet and lovely girl. She always packed food and snacks for me to take to work, and she made such a fuss of Buster. Okay, so she still did her cupboard cleaning ritual every single morning, but hey, we all have our quirks. Having another mouth to feed meant I had to work more hours, but I didn't mind it. For once, I felt like a purpose. She helped me find the reason to live again, instead of just existing. I often took her treats home, such as cookies or Hawaiian pizza, her favorites. If I was working night shifts, she always waited up for me. It made me feel so warm inside when I arrived home and saw her sitting there with Buster. I had no money left at the end of each month, but I had something more. I had happiness. I liked this girl. I more than liked her, but I couldn't tell her this, as she thought I was her brother. I knew I needed to tell her the truth, but I just didn't know how to go about doing so. One morning, after she'd finished her cupboard cleaning and we were enjoying breakfast, I told her about the job I had on, delivering a parcel to Sherry Hill Street. Her eyes widened. Then she told me she wanted to come too. This was surprising, as she's shown no interest in leaving the house before. I mean, she refused to even take Buster for a walk, but I agreed without questioning her. I told her to wait in the lorry while I delivered the parcel. Only when I got back, she wasn't there. I ran around the block searching for her. But then I saw a crowd and it seemed like there's a car accident. My face paled. I ran as fast as I could to see who the victim was, and luckily it wasn't her. Phew. I kept looking around and finally I found her. She was sitting on the curb with her head in her hands. She was crying. I sat down next to her and hugged her. She might be too scared witnessing the terrible accident. Then, when she was ready, I took her home. The next morning, I went downstairs expecting to see her cleaning the cupboards, but she wasn't there. I made her some toast and a coffee and took them up to her room. She opened the door, glared at me, then said, "I remember everything. I know you're not my brother. Alice, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to help you." She shouted at me, "My name's not even Alice!" Then she stormed past me. I rushed after her and heard the door bang shut. She'd gone. So that's it. I was back to my lonely, sad life. Each day after work, I came home to see no one waiting for me. No hot meals, no laugh, nothing but a boring, empty house. 3 months went by, and one day I was delivering some boxes to this rich shop owner guy. The boxes were very heavy, and one of them fell out of my arms and hit the floor. The shop guy started yelling at me, "You idiot! I'm not paying you to be neglectful." But then what do I expect? You can't even look after your own face. I didn't say anything. Instead, I peered down at my feet. Then I heard footsteps, so I looked up and there she was. It was Alice. Oh no, I didn't want her to see me being scorned at like this. Suddenly, she shouted at the man, "Hey, just because you have money doesn't mean you can say anything to others. Apologize to him or I will not let up on you." The man sneered and told her to go away. I couldn't deal with this, so I walked away. But Alice rushed after me and called out to me, "Please, Chelvin, let me tell you the truth." I stopped walking, and that's when she told me everything. It turns out she'd never lost her memory. She faked it because she wanted to escape her miserable life. Her husband was a cruel man who cheated on her, beat her, and controlled her. He was a famous TV presenter, which is why she turned off the TV that time, as she'd seen him on there. She hid when the doorbell rang as she was terrified it'd be him. And she tidied the cupboard every morning out of habit, as if she didn't do it back home, he would beat her. What? This was crazy. I needed answers. So I asked her, "So you faked regaining your memories? And that outburst, it was all a lie?" "Chelvin, I'm so sorry. I knew I couldn't drag you into my personal life anymore. I used to live in Sherry Hill Street. That's why I came with you. I found out my husband thought I was dead, so he married another woman. I made him sign the divorce papers and set me free. I also made him give me a payout, else I'd ruin his precious career." Then she handed me some money and told me it was to cover the expenses for when she was living with me, and that she'd also send me some money to cover her hospital fees. We hugged, and I cried like a baby. Gee, this was all too much for me. But then, to my surprise, she grinned, went to shake my hand, then said, "Hey, I'm Julia. It's a pleasure to meet you." So, after that, thanks to her ex, Julia was able to buy a nice little house. Actually, I'm helping her renovate it. We've become pretty great friends. To be honest, just looking at her makes my stomach flip. I love her so much. I know I need to tell her. Life's far too short not to. If she says no, well, then at least I'll still have her friendship, right? I might not have model looks, but I'm a good person. Julia's taught me to realize that. I hope she says yes, but what will be, will be. Wish me luck.
Do you know what it's like to be a pampered princess? Well, I do, because my dad's a billionaire, so the high life's mine. Not only did we live in a 5-story mansion, but I grew up never having to lift one of my pretty, perfect, delicate fingers. I'm Sophia, and throughout my childhood, I had everything done for me. There was a maid to brush my hair, make my bed, and even do my homework for me. I didn't even have to search my walk-in wardrobe for a daily outfit, as I had my own personal stylist for that. So what? I'm spoiled. But I can't help being so perfect. I'm far too gorgeous to be stuck in a stuffy classroom studying. Not when I could be partying or schmoozing with the stars at swanky cocktail balls. But then, one morning, after a particularly crazy night out, I arrived home with a makeup-smudged face and only one shoe. Dad frowned at me, and then he said, "Sophia, you can't carry on like this. You're going to college, starting next week." "But, Dad, I don't need to go to college. School sucks. Plus, we have enough money to last us several lifetimes. Let's just travel and have fun." But Daddy insisted I couldn't just sleep all day and party all night. Ugh! So, I decided to major in interior design for now. Some of the course was okay. I mean, I liked the pretty fabrics, but I just didn't see the point in being there. So, after a month, I dropped out and planned a long trip away with my besties. But there was one tiny problem, as paying for this trip would cost way more than my allowance could cover. So, I had no choice but to don my best puppy eyes look and ask my dad for money. "Daddy, please. College just isn't for me. But I really feel that going away for a while will help clear my mind." He snorted. "I highly doubt that, Sophia. You're lazy, self-centered, and you rely entirely on everyone to support you. You're 20, for God's sakes, so act like it." I pleaded back. "But Daddy, I just want to have some fun with my friends." "Then get a job and spend your own money on whatever you like. But if you carry on behaving this way, then don't expect any more handouts from me. You're lucky that I still haven't kicked you out, Sophia. But soon—" "What? That's so unreasonable. He was my father. It's his duty to support me." Jeez, did he not love me at all? I was so mad that I shouted, "You're just some sad, selfish old man!" Then I stormed out of there. I was instructing my maid to pack my suitcases when my mom came in and handed me a bank card, saying it's a secret between us two. Yay! Thanks, Mom. Now let the dream voyage begin. Wow, it really was heaven to me, with cocktails in the pool and lazy beach days. Well, at least, that was until my friends said they wanted a day exploring. It was hot and sticky out there, but I didn't want to be left alone, so I reluctantly tagged along. We ended up in this small forest area, and I chose to sit under a parasol while my friends went to take a dip in the nearby waterfall. Because, duh, I wasn't ruining my hair for anyone. I didn't understand how this could be anyone's definition of fun. I just hoped that my friends would hurry back. Then I heard footsteps. I turned around, thinking it was the girls, but instead, there were two men with balaclavas on. Oh no, this couldn't be good. I jumped up to my feet and began to run, but my designer sandals weren't made for swift exits, and soon they caught me. I screamed out as a smelly cloth went over my mouth. After that, the world began to darken around me. I flickered my eyes open. Geez, it was so sunny. Where were my sunglasses? That's when I heard two voices, and I remembered being kidnapped. I heard the one man say, "Got her phone?" The other replied, "Of course. I don't want to upset the boss." I was so scared that I pretended to still be unconscious. Then suddenly, I heard the sound of the engine starting. I opened my eyes and saw the men driving away. Now, I was all alone in some field. What? Why would anyone kidnap someone, then just leave them in the middle of nowhere? My friends must be so worried about me. I needed to contact them. But how? I had no idea where I was, and no phone. Ugh. I should find a way out of this deserted place first, then borrow someone's phone. The kidnappers had left a bag next to me, which had a bottle of water, some snacks, and some gross-looking sneakers in it. Yuck! But I had no choice but to put them on, as my sandals were now torn. Ew! I would need so many pedicures to recover from this. I took the bag with me and started walking. After what felt like hours of torture, a farmhouse finally came into view. I whooped with joy and knocked on the door, but no one answered. I know trespassing is wrong, but this was an emergency, so I pushed the door open and ventured inside. I was just going to make a quick phone call, then I'd leave. But then I accidentally stumbled and knocked over a vase. A smashing sound broke the silence. I panicked and was about to run away, but from upstairs, a man came down and shouted, "Stop! Thief!" Before I could explain, he grabbed my hand and pulled me back. I tried explaining that I wasn't a thief, but he gave me a skeptical look and said, "Well, in that case, you can leave once you've paid for my vase. That's a collectible." What? This ugly thing? Ugh. I told him I would as soon as I made a phone call, so he doubtfully passed me his cell. I stared at it. Turns out I have never cared to remember any of my friends' numbers. I then thought about calling my parents, but no way. I was mad at Dad, and asking for his help right now only meant accepting defeat. No, never. I told the man I would pay when I got home, but he refused to let me go. After a while of arguing, he forced me to stay and work for him until I paid it off. He even made up an agreement and made me sign it. And what other choice did I have? Yep, I was completely stuck here. This was the worst day of my life. He said his name was Manson. Then he showed me where I'd be staying. This had to be a joke. It was a barn. Literally. There was an uncomfortable-looking bed in there, and I could hear horses neighing in the barn next door. Was he kidding me? I was sitting there in despair when my stomach rumbled with hunger, so I barged into the kitchen and ordered Manson to make me some food. But he just pointed at the eggs by the stove and told me to make myself something to eat. Sure, I'd definitely do that. If I knew how to cook? Manson just sat there smirking while I threw the whole egg into the pan and then spent the next half hour trying to work out how to turn the stove on. In the end, I gave up and returned to my so-called room with an empty stomach. If you think that was bad, well, things soon got a lot worse. At 5 a.m., a noisy rooster woke me up, and then started my disastrous days at the farm. I accidentally dropped the bag of seeds onto the floor and got them in my hair, so the chickens chased me around the pen to get to them. I slipped over in the pigsty. Ew! I chipped a nail cleaning out the rabbit hutch. I even fell into horse manure. It was awful. Then on top of it all, Manson was so rude. He just laughed at me struggling with everything. But then one day, it all got too much for me. I was exhausted and felt so dizzy that I stumbled and broke 2 baskets of eggs. It really hurt so bad, and I was even in tears, thinking Manson would be mad. But instead, he ran over to check on me. Then, he even cooked me a nice meal and told me that I'd been doing a great job, despite the accidents. Whoa, what's with this personality change? So, maybe he wasn't as bad as I thought? Over the next few days, I actually found myself enjoying Manson's company. We sat by the fire pit and watched the sunset. We went horse riding, and I managed not to fall off. And he even taught me how to cook. That's when I realized 2 things. Firstly, I'd been a brat. I was lazy, selfish, and I took everything for granted. But now I realized that with hard work came reward. And secondly, I realized that I liked Manson a lot. So I decided to do something nice for him. I gave the barn a makeover. It was just simple things, really. I put a rug down, added some plants, hung up a few pictures and fairy lights. Then I dragged Manson over to have a look. He peered around the barn, then smiled.
Sophia, this is so lovely.
Then he awkwardly looked down at his feet.
Look, I need to tell you something. It's your dad. He hired those men to kidnap you, then paid me to let you stay here.
I laughed over that ridiculous joke, but then he continued.
Your dad wanted you to change your outlook on life and understand the value of money. He only has your best interest at heart.
Wait, was this all just a setup? With teary eyes, I looked straight at Manson and said, I was going to tell you that I have feelings for you, but I suppose you don't feel the same. I need to go. Please tell my father to send someone to pick me up ASAP, unless he's okay with me walking all the way back home without any phone or cash. Then I hurried out of there. He shouted after me, but I ignored him. I was so angry and upset. I continued walking until a car eventually pulled up alongside me. It was our family's driver. He took me home. Then I locked myself in my room, refusing to come out. It took a few days for me to calm down enough to go confront my father. And when I did, well, I found myself running into his arms and telling him how sorry I was. He looked so shocked. I finally realized that my dad only did that because he loves me, and he wanted me to see the true values of life. I told him I would resume my studies at college, but there was something else I needed to do first. I showed up at Manson's doorstep with some carrots for the horses and a new vase. On seeing him, he grinned, then gave me the biggest hug. Guys, life isn't all about designer clothes and expensive holidays. Sometimes a stinky farm full of even stinkier animals and a cute guy, well, that can be the best place in the world. As for the future, well, Manson and I are both taking it slow and seeing where it goes. I do have big plans for his farm, though. I'm helping him renovate the barns into holiday cottages so other people can sample the country life too. A part of me will always be a pampered princess, but as for the other part of me, well, it turns out she can make a mean egg bagel and outrun a pen full of chickens. Don't take life for granted. It doesn't matter how pretty and rich you are. Instead, there's far more to life than just that. I was standing outside of college chatting to my friends when suddenly a police car pulled up, and from the car's window, a handsome police officer waved at me, then told me to hurry up. I excitedly waved back at him, said goodbye to my friends, and rushed to him in front of their admiring eyes. So, I'm Daisy, and the handsome cop is Levi, my amazing, brave boyfriend. We first met at the library in town. I was there for my studies, and he was looking for some crime books. We started dating, and now a year later, we're madly in love. There are so many things that I love about dating a cop, such as seeing him in his uniform. It never fails to make me beam with pride, and I'm not gonna lie, he has abs of steel due to all of his workouts. Swoon! Besides, he has the cutest quirky habits. Like, when we go to a restaurant or the theater, he always scans it first to check if it's safe. But as good as being with him is, there are a few bum points, such as his unpredictable work schedule. Day, night, weekends, you name it, he works it. Then, when we finally managed to plan something, he sometimes got an emergency phone call and had to bail on me. This sucked, especially when it was my sister's wedding. But without a doubt, the most annoying thing of all is his popularity with other girls. They're like moths to a flame around him, especially this one colleague of his, Ellie. One time, Levi brought his colleague Brad over while I was there studying. I heard Brad remark, "Levi, I never thought you'd end up with a bookworm. I thought you'd end up with Ellie. Everyone can see you two have a strong connection." Levi tried laughing it off and saying that it was nonsense, but the jealousy rose up in me. By the time Brad left, I was really upset about it, so I packed up my books and went to leave. He stopped me and asked me what was wrong. Trying my best not to cry, I blurted out, "Why aren't you with Ellie? You spend all your time with her." He shook his head, smirked, then said, "Ignore Brad. He's a joker. And yeah, I spend time with Ellie. I work with her. But it's you I love, and everyone knows it. In fact, why don't you move in? Then we can spend more time together." My sadness was soon overlapped by happiness, and I jumped into his arms and squealed out, "Really? Yes, for sure!" This was so exciting. I moved in a few weeks later, and at first, living with Levi was the best thing ever. But over time, there were little niggling things that started to play on my mind. For example, one day I was chatting to the new neighbor when Levi arrived home and in a stone-cold voice demanded I go inside. Then he sternly told me never to talk to strangers. But come on, I'm a naturally chatty, friendly girl who loves talking to people and making new friends. I don't know, I guess it was me overreacting? I mean, he was just looking out for me, right? But then his need for control worsened when once I arranged to meet my friends in town. Levi was going to come too, but then he had a last-minute work call and couldn't. When I said I'd just get a taxi, he freaked out and told me I couldn't go. After I got upset about it, he reluctantly agreed to let me go. He called a reputable taxi firm to pick me up, then told me I had to be back by 10 p.m. But after a few drinks, I lost all sense of time. I was just having too much fun. I was dancing with my friend when Levi stormed in, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out of there. Everyone was staring at us, not helped because he was in his cop uniform. I even heard one man tut out, "It's always the innocent-looking ones, isn't it?" It was so embarrassing. At home, I sat there brooding while he got me a glass of water. When he tried passing it to me, I jumped up to my feet and screamed at him, "You're being ridiculous, and thanks to you, everyone in the bar thinks I'm some sort of criminal. I don't need a curfew." "It's not like that," he sighed. But I was so upset, I brushed past him and slammed the bedroom door behind me. I cried myself to sleep. I hated arguing with him. I gave him silent treatment throughout the next day. But then in the evening, he arrived home with a gift box and apologized for making me sad. That was so sweet. I gave him a hug and said, "I'm sorry too." Then I opened the box. It was a really lovely watch. I noticed that it had an extra button on it, but I didn't think much of it. I stared down at it admirably as he fixed it on my wrist. That's how caring my boyfriend was. So I decided to buy him something too. The next day after college, I went to the mall. Suddenly, Levi called me and asked me where I was. I wanted the gift to be a surprise, so I told him I was at home. Crossly, he said, "Daisy, don't lie to me. I know you're at High Hill Shopping Mall. Come home at once." Huh? How did he know that? I gave up on finding a gift and went home. When he got back, I asked him how he knew where I was, and I saw him briefly glance at my watch. Then, he admitted that he had GPS fitted to it, but it was only so he could keep me safe. What? I wasn't a kid anymore. How could he use it to follow me? We had a huge fight, and I told him he was controlling and crazy, and he needed to stop treating me like a little kid. Then I shut myself away in the bedroom. The next day, when I woke up, Levi had already left for work. I was so wound up, so I decided to go for a jog to clear my head. Obviously, I left the watch at home, and also my phone. When I got back, I was about to head for the shower when I heard my phone ringing. It was Levi. Then I noticed that I had 50 missed calls and a ton of messages from him. What? This wasn't normal. I'd only been gone for an hour at the most. Anyways, I put the watch back on, then suddenly the door banged open and Levi stormed in, and he yelled at me, "Are you okay? Where did you go? Why didn't you answer my calls?" This sucked, as I love him, but I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. So I told him I needed my freedom, then headed for the door. He looked so mad as he grabbed my hand, pulled me into the upstairs room, then locked me inside. I banged on the door and pleaded with him to let me out. "Daisy, trust me. This is for your own good. You're not safe out there." Then I heard his footsteps trail off and knew he'd left. I curled up into a ball and cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, it was getting pretty dark out there. I searched the room for something to help me and found a rope ladder. The perks of living with a prepared cop. I used it to climb out of the window, but as soon as I reached the ground, 2 men appeared. Then suddenly, the world turned black. When I opened my eyes, I realized that I was in a dark, damp room and I was tied up. The 2 men were sitting by the door and talking to each other. I began to panic. I'd seen enough movies to know that this was bad. One of the men looked over at me, and I quickly closed my eyes. But it was too late. He'd seen I was awake, so he walked over and said, "Ah, welcome back, sweetheart." Panicked, I asked, "Who are you? Why me?" He sniggered out, "Ah, yes. If only that boyfriend of yours was here, then we could ask him." Then he picked up his phone, and seconds later, I heard Levi's voice in the other line. "Hello? Remember me? We seem to have something of yours." I heard the fear in Levi's voice. "Let her go! Your wife's death wasn't her fault. It's your fault she's dead. Now it's your turn to lose the woman you love. Come here alone if you want to see her face again. And don't even think about calling for backup." He hung up the phone, then peered down at me before he kicked the empty barrel next to me. I jolted back, and he laughed. It was terrifying. Not long after that, they dragged a beaten-up man into the room. "Levi! Oh no!" Levi managed to look at me, forced a smile, and slurred out, "My flower girl. Don't worry, I'm here now." The gang laughed at this. Then he stopped in front of Levi and said, "I think you and me need a little chat. Let's call it man business." I knew I needed to find a way to help him. But what? That's when I looked down at my watch. It already had GPS, so perhaps the extra button did something. I struggled to press it, which wasn't easy with roped hands, trust me. But eventually I managed to. By this point, Levi was unconscious, and I started sobbing. I didn't want to lose him. Not like this. The one man set something up next to him. "Oh no, it was a bomb!" He sneered out. "You have 30 minutes left to say goodbye to your lover, boy." Then the man left. I called Levi's name and sobbed out how I loved him. I honestly thought we were both going to die there. And watching the timer count down to our doom was the worst feeling ever. Suddenly, the door burst open. At first, I thought it was those men back again. But instead, Brad and his team rushed over, saw the bomb, then quickly got both me and Levi out of there. I was pushed to the ground just before there was a big bang, and the house exploded. On the way to the hospital, Ellie explained everything to me. So, turns out this involved a difficult criminal case that happened last year. Levi had been investigating a group of drug dealers, but an incident happened, and the gang's leader's wife accidentally fell from the building and died. They arrested most of the dealers, but some got away, including the gang leader. Then recently, Levi had received images of me outside college and our house from them, and took this as a threat to my safety. Well, that explained all of Levi's controlling and weird behavior. I felt so bad for misjudging Levi. He was the sweetest, bravest man, and I loved him so much. I stayed by his side as he recovered in hospital. Then one day, he finally opened his eyes, looked at me, and muttered out, "There's my flower girl." I hugged him, gently, of course. It was such a relief to know he was going to be okay. The gang is still out there somewhere, but hopefully they'll catch them soon. I do worry about it, but it's okay, as I know I have Levi to protect me. After all, he's my real-life action hero, and I know that with him by my side, we'll get through anything. Hey, get up! Who are you? What are you doing in my room? What? Excuse me? Who are you? This is my room. This guy was totally crazy. He insisted this was his room, even though I picked the key up from reception just 2 hours ago. What do you mean you got the key? I checked in first and just left the key at the reception desk to go out and buy some stuff. Whatever. I like the beach view here, so I'm staying. Unbelievable! Then he pulled out his phone and called reception. Okay, so I'm Liana, and I'm in the tropical paradise of Bali. My dream vacation wasn't off to a great start, thanks to this Charles guy trying to kick me out of my perfect beach view bungalow. Poof! Okay, now listen. They admit they gave you the wrong key. He pointed at his phone. Now, go back to reception, get the right one, and they'll probably give you a free treatment in the spa or something as compensation. No chance. I frowned at him. I like this room. How about you leave and go and enjoy a free spa treatment or whatever? Hell no! He growled at me. I paid for it, so I'm staying put. After that, we continued to quarrel until I felt a pain in my chest. And the next thing I knew, I'd fainted. Ugh. I guess it was just far too hot here for arguing. He put a pillow under my head and said, "Miss, you can stop pretending now. Wake up." I had a feeling he was staring at me, but I didn't move. Fine. Keep on playing your little pretend games, but I'm not leaving this room either. Silence. He must have given up. But then I felt a weight next to me on the bed. Without a second thought, I opened my eyes and leaped off the bed. Oh, turns out he wasn't trying to harm me. Instead, he was just sitting on the side and opening his laptop. Oops. He rolled his eyes, told me to go, and then started typing away. I swished my hair back, then said, "In your dreams? Now, I'm off to enjoy this sunny day. When I come back, I don't want to see your face." After that, I left and spent the rest of the day relaxing on the beach. Bali was just so beautiful. At night, I returned to the bungalow and was ready to fall into bed. "Hello," I said as I walked inside. Whoa, he wasn't there. I'd won the battle of the bungalows. I used the last of my energy jumping up and down on the bed and singing out, "He left, I win, he's a loser, I'm a winner." Then I curled up into bed and started to drift off. Smash! I jolted upright. The window had been broken, and lingering at the foot of my bed was a tall, dark figure. I screamed at the top of my lungs. but they lunged forward and covered my mouth with their hands. "Shut up," they whispered in my ear, then pulled their mask off. It was Charles. Confused, I blurted out, "What the? Why did you break the window?" "Quick, grab your things." I pushed him off me and sat there with folded arms. "Nice try, but if this is your way of kicking me out, it won't work. I'm not leaving." Suddenly, another man entered the room. Charles placed his mask back on and quickly grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and threw it at the man. I grabbed my bag in a panic, while Charles took something from his backpack, and then he led me out of the room. We took the back road out of the bungalow and headed into the forest. "Where are we going, and who is he?" I questioned, but he remained silent. "Say something. What's going on?" "Shut up for a minute. Now, I'll take you to the airport to leave this island," Charles grumbled. It was pitch black, and I was trampling through the forest in flip-flops. Ugh! Then, to make it even worse, I tripped over a branch and busted my knee. "Great!" He lowered his back and said, "Get on." I was a bit surprised at first. Maybe he wasn't as mean as I first thought. After a while, he decided we should rest in the forest till dawn. Charles fell asleep the second he hit the ground. I couldn't sleep, and then I thought back on the incident in the bungalow. Thinking about it, I remembered Charles grabbing something from his bag. So I crept over to him and slowly reached for his pocket to see what it was. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm tightly. "Charles, let me go!" I hissed out. My arm started to hurt. "Ouch!" "Look, this is a dangerous business I'm in," he said as he let go of me. "I'm trying to keep us both safe." Okay, I could really see worry in his eyes, so I muttered out, "Fine," then rubbed my arm. After a ridiculously uncomfortable night of zero sleep, he nudged me at dawn and told me to start walking. He took my hand and led me forward. I guess it was nice that he was so focused on protecting me, but, why did he keep looking at his phone? Are we lost?" I asked. He kept his eyes on the screen and shook his head. Then he led me into the other direction, and then another. Yep, we were so lost. After what felt like hours of walking in circles, I slumped down on a rock and pulled a water bottle out of my bag. "Let's just find the hotel," I suggested. "No, we can't. Going back is more dangerous." "But, fine. Can you at least tell me why we're sweating our butts off out here?" "I suppose I've implemented you," he sighed out. "Still, you have to take this to your grave." "I won't tell. Promise." "They're after this." He took a USB stick out of his pocket. "The president of the company I work for is carrying out illegal activities, and this is proof." "Whoa, you're like James Bond!" I smiled as I passed him the water bottle. "Hardly." He laughed. Then he thanked me as he took the water and drank half of it without hesitation, then offered me the rest. He told me he was working for another company and had been sent in to investigate. "So, you're betraying the president?" I asked skeptically. "Kind of. Yes. By the way, I know you just wanted a nice vacation, but I've accidentally dragged you into this mess. I'm so sorry." "Don't worry. I guess this is kinda exciting. But this is the summer getaway with the most insects I've ever had." I swatted a mosquito away. I heard him laugh, but hang on. Why was he all blurry? I slurred out, "Is your head heavy?" Then I saw him faint in front of me, and a few seconds later, the world turned black. I flickered open my eyes. My head hurt. I was tied to a chair. And so was Charles. There were some scary-looking guys staring at us. Oh no, this couldn't be good. One man walked over to Charles and in a stern tone said, "Charles, hand over the USB."
and no one gets hurt. I don't know anything about a USB, he muttered out. I don't want to give out threats with her here, but if you insist. One of the bodyguards walked towards me, grabbed my hair, and pulled it backward. If you don't find value in her life, just keep it and watch her die. Stop! Leave her out of this! I don't have the USB. I dropped it somewhere in the forest. Then he turned to me. I'm so sorry I got you into this. The man sneered. Stop being so emotional, Charles. It doesn't suit you. I was shaking with fear as the man pulled something out from his back and pointed at me. Last chance, Charles? He shouted out. No! It's in her pocket! He must have snuck it in there when we were in the forest. Did he really believe that I would escape and expose the evidence? Then... Cut! Good job, guys! We should be nominated for an Oscar award after this, I joked, while the men kneeled down and untied me. About time, I said snidely, as I took the USB out of my pocket and began spinning it with my fingers. I peered down at Charles and smirked. Thanks for protecting me and everything, but it turns out I have what I needed. What? Who are you? Charles asked in shock. So I put him out of his misery and told him everything. Yeah, I'm the daughter of the company's president, the same said company that he stole top-secret information from. My father asked me to go and find him. The wrong reception key was a setup, and my water bottle has a mild sedative in it. You don't understand. What your father did was illegal, he insisted. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, whatever you say. I started walking away. Please, see for yourself. Look at the USB. I chewed on my lip. Poor Charles. He was no match for me or my father. Soon, we'd all be on a plane and flying back to the US, and then he would pay for what he did. Well, that was a job well done. So now it was time to relax with a glass of champagne. After all, I deserved it. One simple extraction back home, and my father's company would be saved, and Daddy's little girl would get a pat on the shoulder for yet another job well done. Hooray! But I must say, I kinda pity Charles, being a pawn in somebody else's game. He was really nice, and clever too, but not enough to see all this coming, apparently. I took the USB out of my pocket and stared at it. But what secrets did my father keep? We didn't have anything fishy, right? My father did talk a lot about how hard he worked, and how honestly he conducted himself. So why did he specifically ask me not to peek at the file? A little look wouldn't hurt, right? I know. It's not very good of me to disobey my father, but come on, I'm his daughter. I'm set to take over from him anyways. So consider this a double check, eh? Just to be sure. I regret looking at that file. I truly do, as the truth was unbearable. It turns out, my father had been lying to me from the very beginning. So Charles was actually telling the truth. He was indeed stealing dirty secrets from my father to bring it to the light. Ironic, isn't it? I laughed at him for being so gullible and believed the lies about my father's company, while it was me who got lied to. These truths were hard to swallow. I bore the legacy of a lifetime of scamming and cheating. No, I didn't want to live like that. It was just so wrong. As I delivered both the USB and Charles to my father, I knew what I needed to do. So I held the USB out to my father and said, Daddy, I looked at it, so I now know everything. Please stop. Leanna, so your father turned himself in and will be in jail for a while. So what do you plan on doing with the company? I was quiet for a moment. This was a big question. Should I continue with my father's business or put an end to it once and for all? I thought back to the day when I confronted my father. But Princess, I did it all for you. It's your legacy. I don't want to live with dirty money, Dad. You've always been my hero, but now I'm just ashamed of you. His face fell, and I saw the sadness in his eyes. Seeing my father like that was the worst feeling in the world. Then it looked like he realized something. My father quietly nodded, handed me the president of the company seal, and sadly left the room. I'm afraid that I would repeat my father's mistake. So, taking a deep breath, I looked the journalist directly in the eyes and assertively said, "After careful consideration, I've decided to close the company." After the conference, I was on my way out of the building when Charles caught up with me and asked, "Well, Liana, what will you do now?" I shrugged. I don't know. I suppose anything is possible. Although, I do need a place to stay first. I can't return to mine. I can't bear it. Well, if you'd like, you could stay with me. Charles smiled at me. Yeah, I'd like that. Then grinning, I added, as long as you don't try to kick me out this time, or drag me through a forest. I hate what my father did, but in the end, he did own up to his crimes and is paying the price. As for me, I was just going to take one day at a time and see where life took me. And if that just so happened to involve a certain James Bond wannabe, then so be it.